In today's video I get to review a super rare 1920s cinema lens, and it was the fastest cinema lens when it was released in 1927. Today we are looking at the Zeiss Biotar 40mm f1.4. This lens is only one of 50 that are actually made, and thanks to Chris at Skylani, he's converted it to Leica M mount. Close focus distance of only 0.45 meters and rangefinder coupled from 0.65 meters. So in today's video, I'm going to take this lens with me on my trip to Budapest, and we can see how the rendering from a 1920s lens compares to a modern lens that we normally see today. Coming up, you will see some absolutely beautiful bokeh, sample photos like you've never seen from a 35mm lens before. They look more like large format to my eyes, and of course my usual model portraits. With that, let's jump into the video. Hey guys, Matt here from MrLeica.com. Okay, let's first cover the pros and cons of this lens. So I'll probably title this video something like, I wish I'd kept my M8. The reason for this is this lens is a cinema lens, so it only has about 90% coverage of a full frame sensor. Here you can see the hard vignetting if you shoot the lens at infinity, and if you zoom in to closest focus distance, you still get the heavy vignetting, but it's a kind of softer edges like that rather than the super heavy. Either way, it's not going to be great on a full frame camera unless you're happy cropping every single image. I didn't really want to crop every image in post, so for that reason I switched to my Leica CL, which is an APS-C camera. On an APS-C camera such as this or a Fuji or something like that, you will have no vignetting, so you don't need to do any cropping, and what you see is what you get looking through the viewfinder. So that was my plan. I was going to take the Leica CL with me to Budapest, and then I can shoot models and touristy photos and everything else with this setup, and I don't need to faff around with lots of editing in post. I love the fact that this lens will focus to 0.45 meters, and 40mm gives me a 60mm equivalent on a full frame sensor. Okay, so what about the lens characteristics? So first, this lens will flare a lot. On the left with flare, on the right without. Second, this lens seems a bit decentered, so on one side it is sharper, on the other side it was less sharp. This is a big problem when it comes to off-center portraits. You can see on the right, when it's stopped down, it's pretty sharp across the field, but as you can see also in these examples, it is soft on one side, especially when shooting at wider apertures. I love the fact that you can focus close, and the bokeh at close focus distances is absolutely amazing. Here it is shot at minimum focus distance of 0.45 meters, wide open. Here it is at f2, and here it is at f2.8, coming up in a second here. And it's still quite pretty, but wide open is just amazing. Here it is at normal focus distance on a rangefinder camera, and here it is at 1 meter normal distance on a vintage rangefinder camera. So how good is this lens? So here is my first attempt using this lens, and I say the first thing I noticed was the lack of sharpness for off-center portraits where I have my eyes kind of normally in the upper third. So for that reason I had to shoot most of my portraits at normally f2.8 or even f4 for some of them. Luckily for non-portraits, this lens is a huge amount of fun. So after dropping the model off at the station, I just did some kind of snapshot photography, and I just love the look from this lens. It really reminds me of large format where you've got a bit of a tilt shift look going on, because it seems to be decentered, and so one side's always a bit softer, yet the centre is really sharp. It's surprisingly sharp wide open at 1.4 in the centre, but it just falls off so much as you go toward the edges. And this gives a completely unique look like nothing I've ever seen from any lens I've ever used on a Leica 35mm camera. I think in the digital world we're so used to everything being perfect, it's really quite exciting to work the lenses imperfect, because you can use that to your advantage once you work out the kind of the flaws of the lens. So this lens has many flaws, but that then makes it more of a creative tool, and it seems to create images that look more vintage, kind of out of camera. That this lens is uncoated, which means it will flare, as I say, easily, and it just gives you that real glow on any highlights. And yeah, it looks more like a 1920s photo than a 2024 photo. So I'm not sure if this is going to be a similar trait from other fast lenses of this era, if you can find one. But this particular lens, which is a Biotar design, being a Biotar, you get the beautiful bokeh and the swirls, and then you get all the other imperfections thrown in as well. And it looks like, I don't know, someone shot it with a Holga and done some crazy stuff in post. That being said, if you stop it down, you can get sharp images more like a modern lens. On my last day in Budapest, I ran out of film, so I googled shop selling film in Budapest and found the Cafe Analog. This is an absolute goldmine. If you ever visit Budapest, you have to visit this shop. This is non-sponsored. This is just me geeking out over the amount of stock that they had. They had all the popular films and some rarer ones too, and the prices were great. They had film developing equipment. They had paper for printing, if you do darkroom stuff like me. And they even had cameras for sale, such as the Pentax 6.7, which I was taking a look at. So I bought some film, and then at the same time, I did some kind of close-up detail shots with the camera to see how good this lens is close-up. I love the fact that, as I say, you can focus at 0.45 meters, and on the CL that pretty much fills your frame on a 40mm lens. Here you can see some of the cameras they had, and yeah, I was very much in my element just looking around, and I wish I'd taken an empty suitcase and I definitely would have gone home with a lot more film and maybe even another camera. I will put a link to these below, and Skylani, the guys that made this lens, so if you want to get a lens converted to like an M mount, definitely check out Skylani, also known as Omnar lenses. Once I bought my film, it was time to say goodbye and on to do some more tourist photos before it was time to go to the airport. Here you can see some of the old tram pictures, and my eye is always drawn towards anything old when shooting with most cameras, but especially vintage lenses or vintage cameras. Sorry, I should have mentioned it earlier. All the photos I shot were raw with a Leica CL, and then I've added either a black and white Mr. Leica preset or a colour Mr. Leica preset. Actually, the real purpose for the trip was to shoot with film cameras, so I'm going to do a full big video from Budapest, probably the next video that I share. So if you're into film cameras or you just want to see more of Budapest, definitely check that out. I was geeking out over the trams and trying to time it as they were kind of coming past without cars and things being in the way. Here you can see a few more sample photos using this lens, and then after that it was time to get ready for my next model photo shoot. So for this session I'm shooting with Mimi, who's a girl that I've known for maybe 3 or 4 years. Every time I go to Budapest to try and work with her, and she doesn't speak English, so it's really funny. We kind of get amazing photos every time, but we don't really know what each of us is saying. So I normally end up kind of using hand signals to tell her what I'm trying to say. Huge thanks to Mimi. These are photos shot probably at f2, f2.8 and f4. You'll probably agree, if you've got a nice model, it doesn't really matter what lens you use. You could pretty much use your iPhone. If you follow me on Instagram at Mr. Leica.com, I did actually do some iPhone photos and posted those. And yeah, you can pretty much use anything if you've got a good model. The main reason again for this shoot was to shoot with film, but these were just kind of warm-up shots with digital and to show you what you can get with this vintage lens. As with anything with portraits, it's mostly about the lighting and the posing rather than the lens itself. If you've not already downloaded it, I'll put a link to my free model photography ebook below, and I'm still working on the full book. It's overdue, but it is coming. Now, if you prefer to learn from videos, you may want to join my Patreon, where I share 100 plus behind the scenes videos showing how I light and pose models and create the images like you're seeing in this video. A huge thanks to my amazing patrons for making this channel possible. I'll put a link below. And so the question, what is the verdict? Now, the build quality and conversion of this lens is absolutely top notch, but the lens itself is absolutely completely flawed in every way. I couldn't think of a more impractical lens to use, but at the same time I've never used a lens that's quite as much fun and full of character as this lens. If you want to see more from Budapest, feel free to subscribe, because next time I'm going to show you the results from all of this film. I just need to do a bit more scanning and I'll get it out as fast as I can.